Hello and welcome to a Flosstube Extra from Karen the Stitching Owl. I come to you on Sunday, March the 30th of 2025 in case a date matters to you. Today my topic is beading and the questions that people ask me about the actual act of doing the basic beading on the project itself, not on the fully finished. That's another video that I will deal with, but on the project itself. So one of the things that I have done here is I have given you two rows, and each row has 3 separate sets of 5 beads. In here, so I'm going to hold this up close, you can see that my X goes from the bottom left to the top right. When that happens, this is the slant that you get. So the beads will slant opposite to the way you make your stitch. Therefore, when I do the half stitch the other direction, the bead tilts in the other direction. Now I am using consecutive boxes on an Aida cloth, so these nestle well regardless of which way that you make your half cross. You just need to be consistent. If you want your bead to be straight up and down, we do the full X. Now, the difference between the top row and the bottom row has to do with one of the other questions that is asked often. What color do I do my stitches with? Well, many of you pop out to an LNS and get a clear Nymo thread for beading, and that is always an excellent choice. Having said that, sometimes you don't have an LNS to go to and you want to be beading today, not waiting for the post office to walk your Nymo thread through many cities before it finds your mailbox. The top row have been stitched in 153, I believe. It's the color of the background, a very pale mauve. The bottom has been stitched with 931, a blue that matches the blue of the beads. Now the bead pack I'm using is a bead pack that isn't a single color of beads. There are some dark and some light, but barring that, when you look at this, you don't actually see the X to be able to say, oh, stitching it in the color of the background really stands out as magnificently different than stitching it with the color of the bead. So the question is, when do you want this and when do you want that? And the answer, as always with cross-stitching and other embroidery and art, is personal preference will win out. Having said that, I did make a little bit of demonstration for you using diamond shapes. So what I did was I stitched using full crosses and white plain blanc DMC, some diamond shapes, and I made an outer diamond and an inner diamond, leaving one row blank for the beads, as is customary to have happen in our patterns. We don't bead on top of a stitch. We use the stitch itself to affix the bead into the pattern. So now let's have a look at this. With this particular one right here, what I have done is I have slanted the bead so that it follows the slant of the stitching. So when it went this way, I used the half cross going the opposite way so that the bead sat in the direction that the line was going. So this creates a situation where the bead sits into the X's beautifully if you have an actual line to work with. The next one here, this is just stitching the beads in the same direction at all times. And you can see that right here, it fits in between the beads nicely, creating a smooth line. And right here, it's a slightly more bumpy effect because it doesn't go with the contour of the line. The beads are essentially slanted in the opposite direction to the slant of the line that the X's have created. And in this one, what we have is stitching with a full X through each of the beads so that they are straight up and down. Now, the one thing that I have done here is, again, I have used different colors of thread. This first one stitched with the mauve of the background. The middle one stitched with the blue of the beads. Now this one right here, I stitched with the white of the surrounding X's. And one of the things that you see is that by stitching with the white, it actually lightened the color of these beads because they are slightly transparent. You can see that is significantly different than these, but I did pick as best as I could the same color out of my multi-pack as I could. But in all cases, except for this variation in the intensity of the bead color, you do not really see the color of the stitching itself if the bead has been chosen for the size of the X well. If the bead is a bit small for the size of your X, like if these beads had been used, for instance, on a 14 count rather than a 16, there would be more of the cross-stitched X or half-stitch X showing from each bead, and then you would need to look to say, do I want it the color of the background, which is what I do if I've got random stars or snowflakes. Do I want it the color of the bead, which is what I do when I've got a cluster of beads together? Or do I want it the color of the surrounding cross-stitching, which is what I do when I am beading Quakers? But all of this is to say it is personal preference, and what you want to do, I'm just going to do it this way now, is to always take a bit of the corner of your actual fabric and the actual beads you're going to do and try out a little bit like this, 3 to 5 beads using the different colors of thread that you are planning to use, and stand back from it to see what the effect is. Can you tell a difference at all? If not, just pick one and be consistent, and don't worry about the decision. If you can really see it, then it's a matter of figuring out what is the impact on the finished product, the pattern itself, based on how much of the thread that you're going to be seeing. So there we have a little discussion of which direction do I put my X's for my beads when I'm beading, and what color do I do that beading with. I mostly bead with my DMC because I've got it on hand, and my aging eyes find it easier to thread the needle when I can see the thread. The clear enamel thread, or as some people will use things like very similar to fishing line, absolutely awesome, but if if I'm not going to see it on my fabric, I also have a hard time just threading my needle. And for me, the hardest part of beading is always the threading of the needle. But that never stops me from adding bling to my patterns. So I invite you to experiment on the different counts with different sizes of beads and see what you like for your projects.